For a moment, I want you to imagine being outside during a hot summer. To cool down, you slide down the back of the houseboat where your cousins laugh at the weird trick you do while floating in the water. Later, your uncle takes you tubing when the wind picks up and you go flying through the air, both exhilarated and terrified of hitting the water. That night, you get to look up at the stars, looking at the Little Dipper, Big Dipper, Orion, when you sleep on top of the houseboat and feel the fresh air all around you. When you wake up the next morning, you go on a sunrise run of water skiing and wakeboarding, with huge canyon walls of red rock and smooth water like glass all around you. That is what Lake Powell has been like for my family and many others for the past 50 years. Now, I want you to imagine watching the water levels start dropping every year. The invisible rock you saw a boat hit 2 years ago is now over 8 feet above the water. The beaches are getting smaller, more rocky, more prickly, and you wonder how much more rock will be visible next year. This is also what Lake Powell has been like for my family and many others the past 10 years. Lake Powell is one of the largest reservoirs in the U.S., located in Utah and Arizona between two stretches of the Colorado River. The dam was built in 1963, where it then took a whopping 17 years to fill to capacity. When water gets released through the Glen Canyon Dam, it flows over 250 miles to get to Lake Mead in Nevada. Once it exits Lake Mead via the Hoover Dam, it continues on its journey, passing through more reservoirs, and it eventually lands in the Gulf of California in Mexico. Lake Powell is extremely important because it helps provide fresh water to over 40 million people living in the upper and lower basin states, plus people in Mexico. At the dam, it also generates hydroelectric power, a vital resource to the areas surrounding it. Unfortunately, the reservoir is operating at 142 feet below the full pool level, which means it's about 32% full. Well, if it's so low, why can't we just not let water out of the dam? Well, on one hand, the states need a certain amount of water to be let out of the dam so their people and crops can use it and thrive. On the other, the less water we release, the more hydroelectric power the dam can generate, which millions of people rely on. Lake Mead also needs the water inflow from Lake Powell to be able to maintain its elevation, which has its own difficulties maintaining water levels. There's also the law of the river that requires a minimum amount of water to be distributed from the upper and lower basin states through the two lakes, and the interim guidelines, which essentially equalizes the amount of water in both lakes based on their specific elevation changes. Why bring this all up? Well, I just wanted to showcase why research says Lake Powell will never fully recover from being so low. States' consumption of water depends on their population and regulations, and they sometimes go over their allotted amount. In recent years, more water has been taken out of Lake Mead than has gone into it, which causes it to operate in a deficit. Because of this deficit, more water is taken from Lake Powell to stabilize Lake Mead under the guidelines that have been set to balance the two lakes. The law of the river requires a certain amount of water to be taken out each year based on snowfall, and any possible gains made to Lake Powell because of the snowfall usually end up in Lake Mead because of the deficit mentioned before. Water is an extremely powerful tool that we often take for granted. Too much can cause millions of dollars in damage, while too little can threaten entire communities, ecosystems, and livelihoods. When I think about Lake Powell, I don't just think about water levels and elevation charts, but I see my younger self jumping into the lake, spending warm evenings laughing with my family and feeling so alive. I worry that one day kids might not get to have those same experiences because the lake could be gone. That's why this matters. Lake Powell is just one part of a much bigger system, one that millions of people rely on, whether they realize it or not. The more we understand it, the better we can protect it. So, what can you do? It starts with small steps. Please be mindful of your water usage and learn where your water comes from. Support local policies that encourage conservation and responsible planning. By learning the importance of water levels in reservoirs like Lake Powell, we can really begin to understand and start preparing for our future. Education is the first step to change, and I urge you to stay informed about your local water reports and reservoir levels, because the future of our water, of Lake Powell, isn't just up to someone else. It's up to all of us.